Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. Recently, I started covering Kootenay Silver due to some spectacular drill holes that they had reported. And today, I'm glad to have Jim McDonald on the show. Jim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here for the first time. I really appreciate it.
Well, I hope we have more. It certainly looks that way based on your past drilling and your recent drilling and the drilling you're planning on doing. I think I have the highlight hole here. Let me just pull it up. Over a kilo, over a significant width for that kind of grade as well. And this isn't an isolated hole for you guys. You guys have been doing this pretty regularly on this Columba property, correct?
Yeah, correct. So we have, and this program is really focused on this one particular vein you're talking about, and that's the D vein. And what we've realized here, we've been working on this project for 4 years now. We acquired an option to earn 100% 4 years ago, and we now made our last payments this past May, June. Now we have 100% of the project, and that was a big accomplishment for us to get. And when we first came into this project, we saw some veins exposed, saw an old shaft. That shaft went down 200 meters, had 6 tunnels on it, and had been in production around the era of 1900.
Oh, we got a little bit of a freeze. Oh, there we go. You're back, Jim.
Okay.
The computer froze for a second there. It had been mined back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, so 1900, 1910, and then again in 1958, 1960 in a small scale. And that's what attracted us to the project, were the records from that old mine. And we had assay records from the 6 tunnels that showed some really high grades over modest and narrow widths there on what's now known as the F vein. And so there was other veins exposed, and we picked up the option to earn 100%. And we went in right away to drill across that old mine to verify those numbers, and we certainly did that. We now have over 40 holes on that F vein, and we have consistent hits along 700 meters of length and 200 meters of depth. And there's 2 other veins that don't even come to surface there in addition to that. But also there are numerous other veins on the property. And what we came to recognize, that this is actually an emerging vein district with a footprint that's about 4 kilometers by 3 kilometers. And it took a long time to appreciate the size of it, because it is barely eroded. So it barely shows itself to exposure. And it's literally sitting in an old volcanic crater. So it's in an old volcano. And at the bottom of that volcanic cone is your erosional low. And that low point is where the veins are just starting to be exposed. And when you go above that, you don't see your veins anymore. You lose the veins, you lose the silver values, your structures are still there, and you can follow them a long way.
So Mother Nature kind of helped you along the way to get down to the boiling zone of those epithermal veins.
Yeah, well, in a couple ways, because it's hidden it. But in that crater, it's just exposed it enough for the old timers to find and start mining, and then us to come in and get interested. And then since then, we've come to realize that the size of these structures is pretty substantial, and it's of district size, where you can expect to find yourself 100 million ounces of silver or multiples of it. It's the same sort of scope as the Panuca Vizsla Silver, which is over 200 million ounces now, and of the Las Chispas, which is the Silvercrest mine. And it's of that size.
Yeah, Las Chispas I know quite a bit about. And there you have a cluster of epithermal veins. And what's spectacular about Las Chispas is that, they were in debt prior to bringing it into full commercial production. And their first 2 quarters of full commercial production, they paid down all the debt, and now they almost have as much cash as the debt they had at the start of that. And that's the nature of these epithermal vein systems in Mexico, is when you tag the right ones, they can be money-making machines.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's a case in point, and you really need the grade for that.
Right.
And so that's why we're so excited about Columba, is we're seeing the grade. And
actually, just prior to the interview, I looked at your corporate presentation, and even the zone. So you had the shaft and a head frame, and then you look at the zone, and even what you call your less higher grade area is very attractive grade for mines down here in Mexico. I know the numbers very well because I live in Mexico, not far from Fresnillo. And then you get into the higher grade zone, and it just is off the charts.
yeah, it's pretty exciting. And so something you just point out, Allan, was about Las Chispas and the cluster of veins, and that these districts have clusters or numerous veins. And what's interesting is that they'll all make up the ounces you find at the end of the day. You'll have zones in many different veins, but typically what happens is you'll have a couple of key structures that hold most of the ounces. That happens at, like, look at the Panuca discovery. They discovered a second zone, and that second discovery was just one zone. It doubled the resources, doubled. So in one area, one small area. And Las Chispas is the same. There's a small area there around the Babicanora structures that hold about 80% roughly of the ounces. So we think this D vein that we're drilling now could be one of those kind of structures that really bulks up the ounces and holds a whole bunch of the ounces in one little area. And that's the kind of thing that can make everything else you find work. And so we're pretty excited about that.
That doesn't take away from the potential of other veins because at Silvercrest is really focused most of their exploration on the 2 and the 1. But they also talk about their future. Like, well, Jim, that a lot of these epithermal veins, they have a resource, they put it into production, it has a 5 to 7 year mine life, and you keep drilling and you keep mining. Look at Fresnillo, for example. They started mining that in the 1500s with no drill holes, just chasing the veins. And it's been in continuous production since the 1500s. So the whole cluster is important. And even the ones that you don't know of, because a lot of times in these epithermal clusters, you're drilling for one and you find blind veins.
Yeah, well, that's right. And we've done that. We've seen that around that historic F vein, where there's a hangwall vein there. And we're getting hits up to 200 meters over 800 grams in it. So, what's that going to turn into there? We don't yet quite know, but these are blind. So there's a lot more than meets the eye. And even like the D vein, it outcrops its surface, but it's at a high elevation, so you don't have hardly any silver in it. And you can see that in our long section that we show in our news releases, and the cross sections up high. In fact, on the long section, we show that first few holes, there were no significant values at all. And then just 100 meters deeper, now you're getting into real good grades. And then a little bit deeper than that, 150 meters down to 200 meters, and suddenly you're into these hits like 13.5 meters of almost 600 grams per ton. The last hole we reported about a week ago was 9.67 meters of over 500 grams. That's with 2.37 meters of 1142.
Wow.
So, and what's
I think
impressive,
that for the average investor out there, Jim, I think that's not what is not well understood about epithermal veins. They have zonation of grade. Your first trick is to find the boiling zone. But not only do they have zonation of grade at depth, they have zonation of grade along strike. So you could be in one of those softer zones and move over a little and boom, you're in mineable ore.
yeah,
And the same thing happens at depth. So understanding where that boiling zone is in the where the boiling zone is in your vein is crucial. But you guys have definitely tagged that.
we have, and we're quite lucky because as I was describing, this thing's barely suffered any erosion. So we have the entire thing preserved in effect. So we know at surface, we're at the very tip top of this vein system. And so everything else is below us. And so we know where we are. And now we have enough drilling to know generally where that sweet spot is. It's around 1,700 meters above sea level and deeper. And we haven't gotten to the bottom side of it yet. And that'll come in later rounds when we go deeper on it. Right now, we don't need to go that deep. We're still following this thing laterally along strike on practically every vein that we have. But this program is really focused on that D vein.
That brings up another topic, which is that, sometimes in these epithermal vein systems, the boiling zone is believed to be about 300 meters. But sometimes you can get stacked boiling zones. And I looked at your core, and that's it's indicative of a long-lived epithermal vein mineralizing system.
Yeah, the vein and vein structures cut every rock type at surface there. So it's kind of the last thing that happened on this volcano. And it looks to be an intermediate sulfidation style vein. So you've got low sulfidation, intermediate sulfidation, and high sulfidation type epithermal deposits. And the intermediate sulfidation type can have a real big depth to them. They can be 700, 800, 900 meters in thickness and depth. And the low sulfidation are typically tighter. They're typically within about 300 meters.
Right.
Yeah. And so we have, we believe, an intermediate sulfidation type with the mineralogy we see there. And we have tested elevation-wise 300 meters of depth in this system, and it's still open at depth, going to depth. So that's something that remains to be tested even.
As you're describing it, the zonation of grade and the kind of system and the cluster and how open it is, it's given me visions of Mag Silver, Silvercrest, Fresnillo. That you got to have some a lot of interest from some of the miners down here in Mexico that are looking at what you're doing.
Well, we'd certainly be lucky to have something that big. Is what those mines that you've named. They're some of the best in.
Yeah, but Jim, I don't throw those names around for the fun of it. I understand those systems very well, the dimensions along strike and at depth, and I'm not throwing them out there for promotional purposes.
We do have an opportunity at something like that, given the size that we see and the kind of results and widths that we're hitting.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of a lot of drilling just to see how big is this thing.
Well, and that's another nice thing about Mexico. Down here, you get very reasonable drill meter costs.
Yeah, we're working with a drill company down there. Does a really good job, and all portable drills. They move them by hand, And so it's great that we just put in trails you walk on. There's no cat work, big roads to construct. It's so neat and tidy and efficient. And of course, the environmental impact is so very, very small when you're doing that. It's great. There's a great company and doing a great job there. So
You guys must be in at about a third or a quarter of what some of the drill costs are, even in the low cost jurisdictions of Canada and the United States.
well, no, it's like it's not that different than the cheaper parts of Canada.
Okay.
But when you compare it to the remote areas and helicopter-borne projects in Canada, yeah, it's a lot cheaper.
So what are you
Much.
looking at? A couple hundred US dollars per meter all in?
You're a little bit more now. Well, yeah, not that much. So Canadian, it's about 300 per meters
Okay.
all in with the assays and geologists. So
Yeah. Sure is nice that you don't have to use helicopters and be
yeah.
restricted by season, eh, Jim?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, work all year round. You can drive right up the project. It's great.
Well, I'm a little ways from you there, but I might have to make a drive up there someday. I think you've got a hell of a project, Jim.
I think you'd love it, Allan. It's textbook epithermal. We got the whole thing there. We should be teaching field courses there
Oh,
for
wow.
geologists and students. Really, you can see the whole thing. It's amazing.
Well, I know we're on a tight time schedule here, Jim. And do you got a quick minute to talk a little bit about your career? Before we started, we talked about some of the scars you have having gone through the 1999, 2000, when Alamos was first being built. I think we're in a similar situation right now, Jim. And I look forward and I think we've got a better market coming in the not too distant future. What's your feeling on that, seeing as how we both have those scars?
Yeah, I think we're set up for a real good precious metal market here. And it's been building and working on it for quite some time. I mean, what's unusual here is gold is bumping its all-time highs right now, but the gold stocks are not reacting. Silver has not even taken a run at its all-time highs, and it's going to. Imagine silver at $50 a gain. So when that happens, it's a different world. And not just Columba, but our projects where our large resource base is going to be very valuable then, in addition to that. And timing, you never know. And you touched on the Alamos gold story. Well, that started back in 1999 when we had a shell company called National Gold. We were looking for a project. Gold projects were literally being almost given away. We decided, let's not explore, let's buy something found. And there's a big long list of projects we're looking at. We got into the bidding process for the Mulatos deposit owned by Placer Dome and Kennecott. We were successful in winning that. But we had to make these payments and they started right away. And it was really difficult because the project had a feasibility on 2.2 million ounces. And it had a resource of 3 to 4 million ounces. And we were buying it for $12.5 million over 4 years. You can't believe it. And the title was signed over to us for a down payment of $50,000. So fantastic, right? But you couldn't find anybody to give you any money because that project at $280 gold when we signed the deal did not make money. And then by the time we got out marketing it to raise money, gold was 265. And analysts were saying it's going to under 200 somewhere. And we never believed that, of course. And we kept our head down and kept going. And the long and short of it is we brought in Alamos Minerals as a joint venture partner to help us finance this thing. And that worked wonderfully. That was John McCluskey and Chester Miller. And John had an incredible network of investors. And so we ended up merging the two juniors in February 2003 and formed Alamos Gold. And they just recently celebrated they're in their 20th year.
Wow.
Completely different company now. But that's
Well,
how bad that market was then. And nobody believed in the metal or the companies. This time it's a little different because in terms of gold, the metal's doing a lot better than then, but the assets and the companies haven't taken off yet. And I think there's going to be a heck of a market like we saw back then that will go for a few years here.
the price of gold is higher, but so is the cost of producing gold. So, I think if we get a healthier margin between what the average cost is and what the price is, then, that's when I think we'll start to see things get a lot better. But I really appreciate you talking about that time, Jim, because back then everybody thought, we're in a cyclical business that's bad, but it will never get good again. And it sure got good for about a decade. And I really think that right now I'm seeing the fundamentals of supply and demand, monetary arguments, debt issues, currency issues, even the situation with the BRICS nations wanting alternative reserve currencies and for trade. I actually believe the fundamentals are better now for gold, and silver has this element of the industrial uses have just gone off the charts with solar energy, and so there's not a lot of primary silver projects that you can find out there, and you guys have one that looks quite special to me.
Yeah, we do, and we're pretty excited.
Well, so am I, Jim, and I'm glad you came on the show. I should wrap it up. I don't know if you have enough time to listen to the wrap up. If you don't, that's fine. But thanks a lot, and I hope we can do this more.
Okay, Allan, it was a pleasure, and let's do it again.
Okay.
Thanks.
So there you go, folks. Kootenay Silver has a very special project. I am very keen on epithermal veins because I know what they mean down here in Mexico. They have very high grades and they have very low costs of production. And so they turn into very high margin projects that generate a lot of free cash flow. As Jim and I were talking, he meant we talked about Silvercrest and Las Chispas, and it's one of those projects that are very high grade and low cost, and they're mining silver there at about $13 an ounce, and they're selling it for over 20, and that's why they went from bringing it into first full commercial production at owing money. And in the first 2 quarters of full commercial production, they now have as much money and paid down all the debt as the debt was prior to bringing it into full commercial production. These epithermal vein systems down here in Mexico are quite spectacular to mine. I could list off many of them. Mag Silver is another one that's just getting into full commercial production, but the Kootenay Silver has a what looks like the entire cluster of epithermal veins. They're busy drilling and understanding and hitting a lot of high grade over the kind of widths that are consistent with a lot of the epithermal vein mines here. So I really see this as quite a special story, and I am hopeful to do a bunch more interviews like this with Jim from Kootenay Silver. As always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to do your homework, speak with your financial advisor. I don't make buying or selling recommendations on the shows, nor do I do price projections. I use my career of 30 years in the business, having worked with some great people in geosciences, to filter out what looks good to me, but that's based on me. It's not based on your risk profile. So, talk to your investment advisor to assess your risk profile, do that homework, go to their website, check out their news releases, check out their corporate presentation. And I think you'll find a compelling story because I sure have, and I like what I hear so far, and from the drilling and where that drilling will take them in the future. On that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.